Hello, everybody, and welcome to Max Spoilers from MinnMax. I am Ben Hansen, joined by Brian Vore.
Hello.
And Ross, the Star Wars Guy Fund. Welcome back.
Hey.
This is Max Spoilers. We're going to be spoiling everything about the season finale for Loki, so get out of here if you don't want to know anything about it. It feels like we just did this. We were here for Black Widow just last week, but the Marvel timeline is stepping it up a notch. Eventually we'll just be doing this every day with some new Marvel morsel. They'll release, it's just going to be a Quibi every day that's surprisingly important to the canon of the MCU, and we'll just be glued to it. That's the lesson I've learned after all of Loki here.
It's about to get much more complicated.
Oh my God. Okay, so I just got done watching this, and so full disclaimer, I am probably still going to get some things wrong. I'm still trying to work through logically what is going on within the MCU. So please feel free to correct us in the comments. And by the way,
anything you get wrong, we'll just consider it a variant of the proper timeline of this show.
Well, that's what the point of the MinnMax community is to prune all stupid variants for when we're being idiotic. But I should point out, by the way, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can unlock the podcast version of Max Spoilers and a bunch of other benefits by going to patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's, including the full commentary track for the Lord of the Rings trilogy. We just released Fellowship of the Ring. We're going to be going through all those, so you can check those out. We appreciate the support. Okay, season 1 finale of Loki, which now we can say, because they confirmed at the end, season 2 is going to be happening, which, okay. I mean, Brian, give me the big lowdown. How you feeling just after watching the finale of Loki season 1?
Well, you guys may have seen the season 2 announcement at the end of the credits. However, I saw it on a news phone notification before I even got to the episode.
Oh, no.
I usually can stay away from, Twitter. Not used to, news, the, Apple News ruining everything. But I guess, it wasn't too bad. But I'm excited that they're changing things up as far as giving this a definite season 2. It seems like most of these Marvel shows are meant to be in and out.
Right.
To progress the main overall story, and then now, fade back into the night and turn in, these characters go off into movies and scatter to the winds. But it's kind of cool to see this theme to continue.
Yeah, I think maybe it's just because I'm used to that idea of these kind of being one and dones, and that's so rare in the world of TV that I've really been appreciating it. So this kind of feels like I'm more excited about what this means for the rest of the MCU than I am about the idea of a Loki season 2. And I'm sure it's going to be intertwining with things in a fascinating way. But I think watching this finale and realizing okay, yes, it's definitely setting it up in a new territory, but it's also resetting things in some ways. And without spoilers, it kind of feels like, Good Place season 2 or something where I don't know what they could possibly do with this other than just retell the story. But obviously they know what they're doing at this point when it comes to storytelling in Marvel. So I guess I can just sit back and relax. But yeah, I'm more excited about Ant-Man 3 in particular, I think, maybe compared to anything else for the future of the MCU. Just trying to figure out what they're going to be doing in the quantum realm, how that ties into everything. But okay, Ross, what do you think about this whole saga?
Hey, I am extremely excited about the prospect of Loki season 2 because I absolutely love this show. It's probably top 3 MCU for me.
What?
And yeah, Loki season 2 is probably my most anticipated Marvel thing right now, just because I loved this show. It was so good.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, what'd you love about it? What stood out to you for it?
Okay, everything. Okay, that's a bad answer, but it's literally true. Tom Hiddleston, so good.
Yep.
Sophia DiMartino as female variant of Loki,
Sylvie.
So good. The music by Natalie Holt was just amazing the entire way through. I heard you humming it, Ben, as soon as we started this call.
I guess that's a sign that it's working. Yeah.
Yeah, and just the whole storyline of the oppressive bureaucracy of the TVA versus who's more the embodiment of free will than the god of mischief.
That's a good, yeah.
And casting him as a hero was fantastic. So much character growth, the interactions between all the different Lokis were great, particularly the 2 leads. every question that I had after that first episode, I was like, I want to know what the sacred timeline is and why it's important.
Yeah.
Answered in a way that totally satisfied me.
Wow. All right. That's high praise. That's amazing. I mean, Brian, where do you think you're at for just overall enjoyment of season 1 here?
That's really high for me as well.
Wow.
I would say Ross and I had a secret illicit side discussion the other day.
You know that in your contract you're not allowed to talk unless it's a max spoilers, right?
We tried to keep it limited, but we did talk about where it's going to go, and we're like, well, in previous Marvel shows and movies, like a big villain reveal typically doesn't happen, and there's so much they'd have to explain if it was just a new guy that you'd never met before.
Yeah. So
I don't want to speak for Ross too much, but he kind of like, maybe it's like another Loki who's kind of the big bad, and then they wouldn't have, it would just kind of like line up with the theme of the show. Things would keep rolling. And I was like, yeah, they wouldn't have just like a big new total bad guy that would have to just explain tons of things. And they totally defied my expectations.
It was exactly
I know a lot
that.
of people on the internet have been like putting this together. The actor that plays He Who Remains has already been cast in Ant-Man as a character named Kang the Conqueror. So
right.
I think people kind of put that together, but I like to stay away from all that stuff and just kind of experience the show naturally as possible, especially without Hollywood Reporter sending me spoilers of the episode I'm just about to watch.
That's so brutal. Yeah, so Jonathan Majors is his name, and it kind of got around the problem that I think I've had with the last couple finales, and even Black Widow to some extent, but just like the classic Marvel trajectory for each story of, by the end, it's going to be CG Fight-a-Palooza, where they got their CG Fight-a-Palooza out of the way for the last episode. So it was an amazing finale in that sense of just sitting back and realizing like, oh, it is just, here's a new character. Largely, it's an episode all about exposition, which is kind of refreshing for the formula here.
Yeah. And the other classic Marvel thing with your finale of your big, hero origin, which I think this kind of serves as for Loki, is to have your hero fight a dark version of themselves.
Right.
And so going after episode 5, going into this finale, I was like, oh, I'm so confident the person at the end of time is going to be another Loki variant who's been pulling the strings all along, and he'll be like interacting with himself in that way again. And I was like, it's perfect. It makes so much sense. It's definitely going to be what it is. And then they totally did something different, and it was way better. So,
yeah. So the easy shorthand is, okay, this is Kang, but it's not exactly kind of sort of. This is not the Kang that's going to be in Ant-Man 3, because that's going to be Kang the Conqueror. And this is, I don't know this, please, but Reddit tells me that this is a fusion of kind of a couple different Kangs from the comics. So this is technically He Who Remains, and then also Immortus, who's kind of like the oldest Kang, the wisest, nicest Kang. And we don't even get their name here, but it's very much left in the sense of, okay, next time you see this character, it's going to be big evil Kang, and you're going to have to deal with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, trying to wrap your head around the storyline of Kang from the comics is like 100 times more challenging than just wrapping your mind around the storyline of the MCU version. But yeah, maybe we can kind of lay it all out here and get it straight for ourselves. So
Please.
Like there used to be a multiverse, and then this Kang and all the other Kangs would like hang out, but then they started fighting each other for supremacy rights.
Yeah.
And essentially this Kang won, and is casting his victory as like safety for everyone, when in fact I think he was just like the winner, and was like, he doesn't see himself as a bad guy, but he's like, I protected my reality. And then that's what the sacred timeline is that he is controlling all of time and preventing any branches that would create the multiverse.
And so he, maybe not won, but kind of drew it to a close by recruiting Eliath, the big dog skull cloud creature, to help take care of everything. But this is my big question. And this is, some silly sci-fi stuff, so I'm sorry for being so naive. But throughout this entire season, I've been trying to wrap my mind around this. And then in this finale, it was just like on hyper drive mode. I'm trying to figure out what the hell's going on here. I am trying to figure out the difference between multiple timelines and multiple dimensions. Because even that idea of the sacred timeline, is that timeline just for this dimension? Or is the idea of the sacred timeline is every dimension?
I think the timeline is this dimension. So there are no separate dimensions right now, because when like the timeline, I think, is happening all at once, all across time, right? And it wants to like branch off, like they show with the line, which is such a great visual indicator. Just another one of the amazing things this show does. It's
just Back to the Future. Like, here, let's draw it on a chalkboard. It's this. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And so, like, anytime a branch would pass that red line on the top or the bottom, then that creates a new dimension, a new quote unquote timeline.
Okay, so it's not right to say that these other Lokis are from another dimension. They're from another timeline within the one dimension that just haven't quite crossed the threshold to becoming a new dimension yet.
No, I think you can say they are from another dimension, or they would be if they essentially are, because they would be, but they get, pruned and sent to the void or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, that helps.
Yeah, I think the idea is that there's nearly infinite dimensions, multiverses, whatever you want to call them, that were somehow working without any problems. And then the issue was when the first Kang figured out how to swap. Like, once the multiverses start interacting, that's when the problems happen. Otherwise, they can all seem to exist, no issues. Everyone can just kind of do their own thing, and there can be just an infinite branch.
Yeah, it's some good silly sci-fi again, but just that idea of like, oh, they wanted the resources from the other dimension. It's like, your dimension's infinite. That idea of like, yeah, but we want that Earth. It's like, really? Okay, sure, that's fine. Okay, so the other part I was trying to wrap my mind around is, with the MCU, we're already dealing with, this is probably even stupid to ask, so forgive me, but we're dealing with multiple dimensions right now, but Kang was like, I didn't discover that until the 31st century. So is that implying that, like, he's not from our dimension? You would think that he would be, but the idea of like, oh, the Avengers weren't happening and that storyline isn't happening there because it wasn't discovered until so much later.
No, I think he is from quote unquote our dimension, because after he got Eliath, the big cloudy thing, to destroy all the other dimensions, then he created the TVA to preserve the dimension that he came from in the 31st century or whatever, and so that he could stop the proliferation and creation of other side dimensions. So I think he is from this one, but he essentially, I don't know if you would call it changing time, but he changed things so that there could be no other side dimensions other than the one that, the heroes that we know live in. Okay.
And it's also then maybe obviously implied, but because he found the access to other dimensions through his magical portal, which they illustrated very beautifully with like the sand sculpture type things, then that also implies that he was able to travel through time then, correct? If he's like, I've lived 1,000,000 lives, is that him talking about him resetting things on his own so he can move across dimensions and also through time, yes?
I would think so, because the TVA can move through time as well.
Right, so and if he's giving them all that power.
He created it, so he gave them that ability.
Right. Well, this all makes perfect sense. As I was watching this, I was amazed that like just last week we were so focused on Black Widow, and like that's the amazing thing of the MCU is these two stories can run a week apart, and we're like, yeah, well, that's Marvel, but it's like they're so different. One is almost as cosmic and abstract as you can get, and the other one is, we've got to fight to save these women. It's just like such a huge shift, but it's a testament that they can pull off the storytelling without bucking everybody off the bucking bronco here. Let's see. Other big beats we haven't hit? There's so much to unpack here.
There's really a lot.
Yeah. Oh, one that really stood out to me is when the end of episode 4, where they confront the quote unquote timekeepers and then kill them.
Yes.
And then you believe that Mobius and Loki have gotten killed. As far as you know, that was so good.
Yeah. I mean, did you fully invest and did you fully believe that they were actually down and out? Because it's probably a sign of where we're at with Marvel that I was annoyed by myself that I did not believe that for a millisecond, that either of them were down and out. It's like, well, now I guess death just doesn't mean anything for the MCU.
For me, when I saw that Mobius was vaporized, I thought that was real because, it's like, oh, wow, that could be a big character loss, but he's only been in the show. Once Loki got hit, I was like, oh, that's shocking. But then I was like, wait a second. Maybe those sticks aren't all they're cracked up to be. Maybe they just warp people to a different dimension. And then, of course, was it the post-credit scene of that episode? He just kind of wakes up to all the other Lokis. Right.
And the alligator and all that absurd stuff. But Ross, did you think they were down and out?
Same exact thing as Brian. When it happened to Mobius, I was like, oh yeah, Owen Wilson was an and credit. He could have just been in these 3 episodes.
Right.
But then when it happens to Loki, you're like, oh, that was crazy, but there's got to be a twist to it. And I mean, clearly they didn't want people to have to wait a week to find out because they threw in the post-credit scene with all the Lokis. Did you guys have a favorite variant Loki, by the way?
I wanted to learn more about the President Loki guy, the one that has the button. I'm sure that's an ongoing story in the comics that I should probably dive into just to understand what was happening there. But I thought that was very fun because they released that image so long ago. And so I had that image in my mind and I was like, oh, here's the context. It's him actually recruiting a bunch of other Lokis because he's president of maybe this bizarre time at the end of time.
President of the Void.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I liked, what was his name? The guy who had more the comics accurate costume, kind of older.
Yeah. Richard E. Grant.
Yeah, Richard E. Grant.
I thought he was cool. I'd be interested to see more about him. And I just love how in these TV shows that they have no problem going comics accurate, no matter how ridiculous the costume is, and it totally works.
Yeah, they always find a context where it can absolutely work, and this is a great example of that. Yeah, I mean, that entire Void area, I know I saw Imran Khan on Twitter make the joke about 100 Lokis jump out of a plane. But that entire area did honestly feel like a battle royale, especially when they're in the crappy little car, trying to outrun Goliath. And it just seems like the wall closing in PUBG. It's this is, if Marvel Games ever does make their battle royale, that's the perfect spot for it. Because you get all variants across time, all these different Easter eggs, everything would make sense in the Void. They have the Thanos copter in there for a vehicle. You got everything you need.
Cool. That's a genius idea.
I think and Fortnite's done a lot of Marvel crossover stuff too, so
right.
I wouldn't be surprised if they brought this in as all right, here's a way to hype season 2. Let's all of Fortnite is changed to the Void.
That's a great point. That's a lot cheaper than actually getting a studio to make your own battle royale. Yeah, and I think Epic would be down for that. But okay, that episode also has Sif coming back. For the big cameo of the century for the hardcore Thor fans of her just punching Loki repeatedly in a Doctor Strange-like time loop. That must have been fun for you folks.
Yeah, I mean, Brian knows as a fellow Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. watcher that she actually showed up on that 2 or 3 times and was pretty awesome in that. So I think she is confirmed to be in Love and Thunder too, right?
Oh, really? Oh, I hadn't seen that, but that's fun. Tying back to the origins, yeah. Also, in that episode, they have a quick line where they talk about, I think it's when they're talking about the TVA and all the people they've brought in. They're like, we've brought in Titans, we've brought in Kree, we've brought in vampires. And it's like, oh, I think it's the first time they've been setting up the Blade storyline within the MCU, unless I'm forgetting something, but...
No, I think it's the first time, and it's probably Blade, unless you think they're going to do a crossover with Morbius. Don't forget about Morbius.
Morbius meets Mobius, finally! The matchup we've been waiting for.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
The other thing in that episode is, did you guys feel like when Kid Loki gave our Loki the sword, that it was going to transform into a more normal adult-sized sword?
No, but I did it does light on fire, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's pretty good. Anytime you can light a sword on fire, it automatically makes it 1,000 times better. It's getting near lightsaber territory there.
I think there's not a lot of rules for Loki's, but one is that he can only have a short blade or a long staff. He can't really be equipped with anything else.
Yep, I think that's true. The rules of Loki, even after the season, I know I'm coming in negative and nitpicky, and I apologize, but I'm still confused about the powers. Like every time I think I have a handle on what a Loki can do, then there's that shot where that building's falling on them in the apocalypse planet, and Loki's just like, uses the force and like puts the building back up. I'm like, what is that? I want, this is very nerdy, I want like a Wikipedia article breakdown of like, here are Loki in the MCU's powers. He has these 6 moves, learn them.
Well, that other Loki built an entire city to distract the smoke monster too, so
but that
there's
one,
really no limit.
But I feel like I understand that.
Like, oh, wow, I think we might be more powerful than we ever knew. So
right. And there's the enchantment and all that stuff, but at least that's like the illusion. And like, that's something we've known about Loki since the beginning, is him making himself look like other people. I feel like that's just an extension of that crazy power. But there are times where it's like, okay, I'm lost.
Speaking of the powers, I was surprised that Loki was so fascinated by enchantment, because that was kind of his main move. He used to have the Tesseract to enchant people, but that was his main move, like early on. Right.
Early on, which was like 2 weeks ago for this, whenever the show is happening or whatever it is. Yeah.
I guess it'd be like if you learned you could toast a piece of bread with your hand and you're like, I didn't need a toaster all this time. Incredible.
Yep. It's perfect. We haven't talked too much about Sylvie. Ross, you're all in on this new character?
Yeah, she was fantastic. And I like, a lot of it is that I also just love how ridiculous it is that Loki gets a love story with himself, essentially.
Right.
Just perfect for the character. Although, like, as she kind of underlines it at the very end there, where they have the big final kiss, and then she pushes him through the doorway. She says, "I'm not you." They're different people at this point, which is kind of interesting. But overall, yeah, I thought the actress was great, and the character was so delightful. If you guys remember, that was my prediction in our first Max spoilers, was that it might be female Loki. So I just feel really good about that too.
Yep. So you're already invested. I totally get it. Where do you think they're going with her moving forward?
No idea. That's the other thing I love about this show, is like, I was like, I think it's going to do this, I think it's going to do that, and then it never did it, and it was always something better than I could have thought of. Okay. So clearly she is going to be in season 2, and Loki, I mean, I hope at least, and our Loki Prime, or whatever we're calling him, and I hope those 2 kids get a chance to rekindle this love story.
I mean, they're setting her up, I think, to be more of that villain role. Like, whatever she's going to be doing in the Citadel at the end of time is probably not going to be great. Like,
yeah, it's interesting that she chooses to get rid of Loki Prime, and then to kill He Who Remains. And you would think she'd be just kind of taking over time and the throne, which was her biggest fear of what Loki Prime was going to do.
Right.
But she ended up doing it. But then you see in the TVA that the giant He Who Remains statue is there. So it feels like he's still in place somehow, unless she's using him as a Wizard of Oz type of thing, like he used the Timekeepers. I don't know.
That statue was definitely a Kang, like a Kang costume. That was like his classic comics costume. So I think it was not the guy that she killed, but a different.
So the statue costume was different than what he was wearing. Okay.
So I took it that Loki was kicked to another dimension, but are you guys not reading it that way? Are you reading it as things were reset and this is technically the same world then?
That was my biggest question coming out of it, was why don't they know who he is? And then that's my only guess, is what you just said. He got kicked to a different, now that the multiverse is back, he got kicked to a different version of the TVA that, is not his version where he met them. So this is one where they've never met him, or a Loki probably.
Yeah. It's so interesting how they're going to frame this for, I guess, Multiverse of Madness, right? Doctor Strange moving forward, which will guess will be the first place where they really unpack all this, and that is March 2022. But it's an interesting idea of, if you watch the shows, then you know that things were on a locked path. There was no free will. Everything was going according to plan. And then boom, shattering, it explodes. Whereas if you didn't watch the shows, then you just think, well, it's reality, strangely enough. And there's multiple dimensions. And of course, it's going to be possible for other dimensions and people and characters from other dimensions to pop in. So it's like a really interesting framing to bypass anybody who maybe doesn't quite have Disney Plus, because it all ends up in the same place of you never know what can happen.
Right. Yeah, I figure like Disney Plus fans and watchers are kind of like, we've seen behind the Matrix, and everyone else is just living in that Matrix world.
Yeah, man, those sheeple.
But I think it's definitely pouring over into the movies for sure. But it's going to be interesting to see all the content pre-Multiverse of Madness, because that one seems, just by the title alone, to be going all in. But like stuff like Shang-Chi and Eternals, like, is there going to be a bunch of multiverse stuff going on, or are they going to have to like write on the bottom like 2017, or like sometime before everything shifted, and it's just like, hey, normal story, just keep an eye out, like.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, this is where my brain melts. But like, when was everything broken? When were the multiple timelines created? Does it ripple back through time, or is it because all we have for a timestamp is it was after the first Avengers? Is the implication that maybe this happened in 2012 within the MCU, and that's why they hadn't factored in Thanos, and it's not like Kang was watching Thanos kick everybody's butt? But wait, no, that doesn't make sense, because, well, I don't know, but I guess Miss Minutes or whatever said like, oh, you could defeat Thanos, you could get the Infinity Gauntlets. That implies that then that's after that, but is just the concept of time meaningless, and we should just take it as there's not a date when this actually triggered into the multiple dimensions?
Kind of. So yeah, it's everything that we've seen thus far in the MCU has happened in this reality where there's only the one dimension, because Kang has been in control of that forever. Right. Now, after this point, the multiverse does exist again, but it can happen at any point. Like you could see on the timeline in the TVA, the branches were coming from all over the place.
So back in time, they were creating.
Yep. Yeah. So new realities can like branch off at any point from the timeline, but our timeline of the events that we've seen remains consistent as just the events of this reality.
Okay. I mean, I thought explaining the MCU to somebody was complicated before, and now once you factor this, and it's like, just forget it. I'm sorry, you can't get in there. Yeah,
so that kind of gets at, and we touched on this a little bit with talking about, the female with Sylvie. What do you guys think was the right choice? Should they have let the TVA continue to exist as it was? Should they have taken the throne? Or do you think that she made the right move in just like killing Kang and then letting it all unfold however it's going to unfold? I think you take that Cypher deal. I think you say, get me out of the TVA, put me back on Earth, or put me back, in Asgard, and let me just forget that all this exists, and let me have the illusion of free will. And I think that's probably the right way to go. But I mean, He Who Remains also was done, so who knows? He was tired, he was old, so who knows if he just would have given it up anyway and everything would have gone to hell.
Yeah, it seems kind of a lot to take on. Well, because he said you had two options, but they gave that, like you were talking about, they gave that first option where, hey, why don't you just live in a fantasy land that's not real?
Right. Yeah.
And then after they are like, no way, then they can either both take over running all of time together, or they can kill him and everything goes crazy. But if it's assumed if they both took over, they would kind of be continuing his work of maintaining the one timeline. Yep. So, I mean, none of those options really stand out as like super great, because a hero can't like there's a common thing in comics and TV to like present this fantasy land where all the terrible things that happened to you that made you who you are would be wiped away and you could just live a normal life. Heroes can never accept that. Like, it's such a tempting deal, but it's only good for an episode or a season at most, as we saw in WandaVision.
But as they said, they're all villains there. Did they have some line like that at the end? Like, that's the fun of Loki is he can maybe choose that path just to be a little stinker.
That's true.
Yeah.
You seemed so turned by the end of this show.
Yeah.
Like seeing old clips of Loki, like watching back, for Black Widow, and we saw him, trying to manipulate Black Widow. You're like, wow, he was really nasty back then.
I know.
He's such a teddy bear now.
I know, he's such a wimp. Yeah, I like that line. It's like classic weird Owen Wilson for the series was just in the finale when he's like, we can't take away people's free will. Can't you see that? Owen Wilson arguing for free will. What a weird turn for the MCU, but sure. And then that
I love it so much.
It's so silly. But then the idea of then the judge going on her grand adventure to search for true free will, which is like, well, that's the greatest setup narratively. Like, she could go anywhere and do anything, but was I supposed to make more out of that, like, principal scene? I didn't quite understand what I was looking at there.
I think it was just the way that they showed, or the other hunter, that they are all variants. Like, he's like, oh, she must be a variant then. And if she's a variant, then we're all variants, I guess. And along with, showing you just where Ravonna Renslayer came from.
Okay, got it. That makes a lot more sense then. Yeah, because I was trying to figure out, like, well, why is he so shocked? I mean, the whole point is that there's a bunch of everybody, right? But I guess, yes, it's that variant detail. These are very basic things that I missed.
It's strange, though, because you see them and you're like, okay, they've seemed like they've been through stuff together. And, like, at one point, someone drops that they've been friends for eons.
Right.
And this is just to, like, underscore, like, hey, it's a big deal that they're not agreeing on this and going separate ways because they've really had a long relationship that we've not seen, but just trust us, it's there.
Yeah. Just another small detail I love, the ultimate expression of free will and chaos, not using a coaster.
Interesting. Yeah, great point. Thematically, it works together. I mean, I read Infinity Gauntlet, right, is the name of the comic, and I remember that order and chaos, like, as characters, were a big part of that. And so it's interesting when they're talking about, we're descending into chaos and all this stuff, and it's like, I'm sure Marvel, big fans of the comic books, are just waiting for, like, are they going to actually introduce the personification of chaos at some point, or is it just, it's the multiverse, it's chaotic enough, we don't need somebody to be like, and now I'm the figure that is the chaos, that is the shattering of the dimensions. Like, oh God, that's too much.
I mean, who knows where they'll go? There's a personification of everything in the comics, I feel like. And they could appear at any time now. Like,
it's game on. Okay, what is the deal with Miss Minutes, the Mr. DNA thing? So that's something that Immortus here, He Who Remains, created himself?
Yeah, clearly she works for him or is like a familiar to him or whatever you would consider her to be, because she's the one who comes out at the start and tries to tempt our two hero Lokis into not confronting him.
Yeah.
And then she also is the one who gives Ravonna whatever information she got from Kang Immortus that sent her on the journey to discover free will or wherever she's going.
Right. So even though Immortus is gone, in a way, his will be carried on by her on her big quest. Maybe that'll be a weird thing for season 2. I saw
one. Okay, which is Immortus? This He Who Remains guy? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. I guess it's the same character.
Comic book name or whatever.
Well, yeah, like I said, like it seems like comic book fans who fully understand this stuff are saying that that character is kind of a fusion of these two different forms of Kang narratively. Nice. Yeah. So
it seems like she's on the mission to kind of trim the timeline back to where it was and everyone else, while everything else is going crazy?
Maybe?
It could be. I don't think we have enough information to guess. It could be anything. She was so vague about, what she was saying when she was jumping through there.
Yeah, for her to discover true free will, you would think that she wouldn't just be pruning the timeline, but yeah, it is.
She was looking for was she looking for the free will, or was she looking for the person behind the free will?
I think she said she's going to go search for free will. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I thought she was just going to pop up and be a third person in that, be another person in that room. I was like, she never showed up. Like, where did she go?
That's the big setup, man. That's what Hollywood Reporter is trying to warn you about. Is she's going to be a big thing moving forward. She could be anywhere. Yeah, because it is that challenge of like, okay, you want chaos to be minimized just narratively moving forward. But then if Doctor Strange and Wanda and everyone's like, the multiverse of madness is over, we've collapsed it all down, then that just inherently means that then there's only one timeline and there is no free will. So then what's the point of the victory?
Yeah, there's gotta be some kind of different angle on it for Doctor Strange. I don't think after this whole storyline, I don't think the story of that can be that there can only be one timeline, because if there's one thing I think this show was clear about, it was that it was wrong for the TVA to come in and like essentially kill children who've done nothing wrong, like, which is what Sylvie was, and why she was so bent on revenge. So, I think that was clearly stated, is that it's like immoral to prune the timeline. So I think that it's going to have to be some kind of different angle on it in Doctor Strange.
Yeah, I guess so. And I mean, even before Doctor Strange, then we have the third Spider-Man movie, which seems like it's going to be dealing with multiple dimensions. But do you think that's just going to be like the fun of multiple dimensions, and the Multiverse of Madness is going to be about like, we got to close this stuff down? Is that how they're going to kind of arc that?
Does multiverse, if this is all a phase, official Marvel phase, do we get a true conclusion to the multiverse that soon? Or is it, several years in the making, where like, how we saw Thanos as the end credits stinger for so many movies and everything was building towards that?
Yeah.
Do they close up the multiverse so quickly? I feel like it's going to continue to be an issue. And maybe Kang is kind of this, like, anytime, even if you could kill him at the end of a movie, the bad Kang, could always be another Kang, until it feels like the ultimate solution has to be multiverses have to all exist together, but there has to be some kind of wall to keep them from interfering.
I think that's exactly it. I think that's probably where they're going to leave it for Multiverse of Madness, is that idea that like, okay, multiverses exist, but there are distinct gates, and we have sorcerers guarding these gates, just so narratively they can deal with that in the future if they want to, but that it's not complete chaos.
Yeah, I think we're building up to another, endgame level storyline here, where Kang is at the end of it, and that's the end of the multiverse storyline. Like they eventually defeat him and be like, okay, everybody stay in your own dimension, please. We're all done here.
I mean, okay, looking at the slate though, and I have it pulled up here. I mean, the furthest we have going out is Fantastic Four. And that seems like, would they be dealing with that storyline there, or would they be extending it beyond that? Because, Ant-Man and the Wasp, that's February 2023. And so they're going to have some version of Kang going on through then. It gets confusing, naturally.
Fantastic Four definitely could. They're the crazy science adventures, comic. And there's kind of a famous storyline by Jonathan Hickman that's like 10 years ago that it involves a council of Reeds, where Reed Richards, leader of the Fantastic Four, gets like brought into an interdimensional group of all these different Reed Richards trying to help each other. I was reminded of it actually when Kang was telling his backstory about all the different Kangs hanging out, helping each other before they started fighting.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's not outrageous. Also, this is very obscure, but in the intro to this episode, which I guess we didn't hit on yet, but that was very cool. Instead of having like the Marvel title music of having just classic quotes from across the entire MCU, and you just have no idea what's happening. But as it was flying through, I could have sworn there's like a quick shot of like a spaceship in there. It's like, oh, here it is. I'm actually watching it right now as it goes by. It could be the Milano. That's the Guardians of the Galaxy spaceship, right? Yep. But I wonder if some fans are going to dissect this intro 1,000 times and try and find some hint of what is going to be going on with Fantastic Four. But
I bet there's going to be like a nice hour-long YouTube of somebody going like, okay, now this is this and this is that.
Yeah.
They've already kind of dug through some of the audio of, there's obviously a lot of obvious quotes. Someone mentioned that the song It's Been a Long, Long Time, which is Steve and Peggy's Endgame dance was played. There's like some real life quotes, I guess, from like Greta Thunberg and
really?
Vala. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Like some other famous figures. So it seems like there's a whole lot to dig into there, which I'm glad, because sometimes I kind of skip until after that the Marvel thing is out of the way, even though the theme song is great. But sometimes I'm just like, I just want to get to it. So I'm glad I didn't do that this time, because it seems like there's a lot of juicy stuff in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of juicy stuff in here, a lot of things to unpack, try and wrap our mind around, and the only thing that it seems like the Loki Reddit wants to talk about is that it's complete nonsense that there wasn't the big jet ski scene. Everybody was all in on Owen Wilson on a jet ski as like the post-credit sting or something, and nothing.
Absolutely wanted to see it. I can only imagine they're saving such a big moment for the true finale of the series.
Yeah, that's the only way to end it.
It's just him going off a sick jump on a wave, dun, 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 and then that's it. Series is over.
Freeze frame.
He's riding behind Kenny Powers.
Oh, it's going to be so beautiful. All right, that is Loki. I'm curious what everybody thought. I don't want to be Mr. Downer. I think it's my least favorite of the Disney Plus Marvel series so far. Like, it has a lot of interesting stuff in it. I think it was just that problem of like the entire series. I was like, what am I rooting for to happen? Like, obviously the character's motivation is a big thing too, but I was like, personally, what do I want? It's like, I guess I just want to see the timekeepers. And then you see that and it's like, they're not real. And it's like, okay, I guess I just want to see what's behind the veil then. But I feel like I wasn't rooting for anything in a big way. And I don't know. I don't want to be too negative though. I still enjoyed it overall.
No, it's good to have your thoughts out there. I think.
Thank you.
We a lot of times can fall in the rut of just like, and Star Wars, so it's good to have some of that. I think this show had a tricky business of satisfyingly concluding a television show, and also setting up doing a heavy lifting of setting up huge Marvel cinematic direction going forward. Yeah. So they kind of, got the privilege, but it's also a huge weight and responsibility, and it may be kind of hard to do both at the same time. Yeah, for sure. It is still just the greatest entertainment feat of all time that these stories are all intertwining and working together. I mean, it was hard before, nearly impossible before, for Feige and the team to keep all this stuff in line. And the idea of adding these Disney Plus shows in a way where it makes sense to have them all intertwine and build upon each other this is just nuts. It's crazy. And just the fact that we're getting into multiple timeline stuff, different dimensions, all of that, and that these stories are still essentially the most popular thing in entertainment is insane to me. Yes. Yeah, I know. People should have been lost a long time ago or lost interest. And the fact that it's still increasing is bonkers. But hey, Celeste Leon here, watching us at the Backstage Pass tier. They can watch all of our stuff live at that $10 tier on Patreon. He says, I'm on Team Entertainment Compatriots. This is in my top 5 Marvel stuff. Yeah, nice. I think the fan base is really into this. I think I'm definitely the outlier. But again, still enjoy it. Just not as over the moon about it, I think, as most people. But maybe I'll sit with it for a long time and learn to appreciate just how freaking weird it is, because it definitely accomplished that. I think the big lesson of Loki is, say we're all like varying degrees of comic fans, right? Yeah. From back in the day or whatever. But there's certainly like super hardcore comic fans. And the whole time, like anytime someone casual is like, well, what's going on with Captain America these days? And they're like, well, you see, there's like this book running here and this. So like that was always too scary for me. And now I think we've unintentionally become the movie comic book nerds.
Yes.
Where people now come to us and we're like, well, there's this multiverse going on. And like, now they're just like tricked us into becoming that level of Marvel fan for a different property, and without us even realizing it.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the power of the system has, turned what feels like half the world into hardcore comic book nerds when it comes to trying to keep all this lore in your head and just craving the next drip of a storyline. It is bonkers what they've accomplished. All right, that's Max Spoilers, everybody. We'll be back, I guess, for the next, there's What If, the Marvel thing, which I'm looking forward to. I don't know if we'll do Max Spoilers on it, but that should be great. And then Shang-Chi, which, by the way, I was listening to an interview with Kevin Feige recently, and he called it Shang-Chi multiple times, and it really, really confused me. So please, if somebody understands, please let us know the best way to pronounce it.
I'll call it whatever. You just tell me what the official way to say it is.
Let's go for it. But yeah, that's coming out September. So we'll definitely be doing that one. Eternals in November. And then the next show is either Hawkeye or Miss Marvel. Both are still scheduled for 2021, but I guess they don't have dates on those quite yet. But yeah, we'll be back for most of that stuff. So thanks to everybody for listening to us or watching us on YouTube. Ross, would you like to plug anything?
Sure. Yeah. Follow me at Are You Bad Enough? And I don't know. Tell me who your favorite Loki is and why it's not alligator Loki if it's not alligator Loki.
Okay, great. Perfect. Brian, what do you got, man?
Just follow me on Brian_Vor on Twitter, and I won't tweet out spoilers in the morning of the show's debut. I promise you that.
That's a great promise. We appreciate it. Cool. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.
All right. See ya.
Bye,
You can help support independent games media by subscribing to MinnMax on YouTube here, or you can support us over on Patreon to unlock exclusive shows like MinnMax Council. You can call into our podcast. You can put a picture of your choice on every MinnMax video, or you could have us plug your passion project on the MinnMax Show podcast. MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better, and we exist because of you. Any help telling a friend's appreciated.